Welcome back to Football Daily, where today we're looking at 10 managers who were sacked too soon. Let's go. 10. Louis van Gaal. We start, as with every story of incompetence, at Old Trafford, where Louis van Gaal arrived after a triumphant run to the semi-finals of the 2014 World Cup, with the Dutch side everyone had written off. Hailed as the kind of strong personality and astute tactician who should have succeeded Alex Ferguson in the first place, Van Gaal was handed Blind, Shaw, Herrera, Rojo and Di Maria in his first season at the cost of £175 million, while Radamel Falcao joined on a pricey loan. The team climbed from 7th to 4th that year, but Van Gaal set about dismantling United's reputation for attacking football. He succeeded in turning Herrera into a DM and Ashley Young into a wing-back, but the club recorded their worst goals-to-game ratio since 1993. The following year got even worse, with just 49 strikes in the league, a tally bettered by 9 teams, and fewer shots per game than Sam Allardyce's Sunderland. An FA Cup win wasn't enough to save Van Gaal, and he was sacked after 2 years in charge. This may sound like we agree with the decision, but the consequence was a huge outlay on Jose Mourinho, who immediately demanded another £167 million to conduct a rebuild of his own, which would ultimately prove fruitless. With Pep Guardiola, Carlo Ancelotti and Antonio Conte all changing clubs in the summer of 2016, a little patience could have prevented years of heartbreak. 9. Marco Giampaolo. The Milan clubs have made an art of shooting themselves in the foot over the last decade, and while Inter seem to have pulled themselves out of that slump, the Rossoneri remain stuck in mediocrity, and things don't look like they'll get better soon. After appointing several ex-players as managers, Seedorf, Inzaghi, Gattuso, they finally took a swing at a progressive, proven coach in 2019, poaching Marco Giampaolo from Sampdoria. While Giampaolo's Samp teams were merely mid-table sides, they played attractive possession football and improved year on year, despite losing important young players like Lucas Torreira, Skriniar, Bruno Fernandes and Carrera. Giampaolo extracted the maximum value from unfancied journeymen like Gaston Ramirez and Fabio Quagliarella, and at Milan he had to institute a whole new style, with the team having got used to Gattuso's negative tactics. The abrupt change meant he won 3 and lost 4 of his first 7 games, but rather than persisting, Milan decided to burn it down, sacking the 52-year-old and bringing in Stefano Pioli, who had been rejected as not good enough by rivals Inter just 2 seasons earlier. Shockingly, it hasn't worked out, and Chief Executive Ivan Gazidis is facing a third managerial change in under 2 years at the San Siro. 8. Frank de Boer. The story of Frank de Boer at Crystal Palace is a tale of bad planning and bad luck. The Dutchman arrived to replace Sam Allardyce in 2017, and after 6 years at Ajax, where he won 4 successive titles, he made it clear that he wanted to change the Eagles' style, instituting a possession system rather than the long ball favoured by Big Sam. But Palace, despite their lofty aspirations, gave him just 2 permanent signings, Jairo Ridwald and Mamadou Sakho, refusing the full squad turnover the boss requested. 4 games into the season and Palace were rooted to the bottom of the table with 0 points, 0 goals scored and 7 conceded, making them the first team in 93 years to start a top-flight campaign with such a long goal drought. De Boer, unsurprisingly, was sacked after the shortest reign in Premier League history, and his successor, Roy Hodgson, was given plenty of credit for keeping the team in the Prem. But while results were bad under De Boer, the underlying numbers were solid, with nearly 5 expected points from those 4 games, and a predicted goal difference of -2, better than 6 other sides. His 5-4-1 was mischaracterised as a 3-4-3 by his critics, and no one blamed the real culprits for the failed experiment: the board. While Hodgson has since worked wonders to keep the defence afloat, recruitment has continued to focus on overpaying ageing players, resulting in the second oldest side in the division. Palace may have escaped the drop that year and to date, but if they don't make a change soon, relegation may be just around the corner, and De Boer tried to warn them. 7. Sam Allardyce. For someone who has managed 7 different Premier League clubs and the English national team, Sam Allardyce seems remarkably bitter about the lack of opportunities he's been given. But while he has generally been treated as he deserves throughout his career, there is one notable exception: his exit from Blackburn Rovers in 2010. Allardyce took over the club 2 years earlier from Paul Ince, when they were sitting 19th in the Prem with 13 points from 17 fixtures. In his first game, he masterminded a 3-0 victory over Stoke City, ending an 11-match winless run, and they would go through the next 9 games unbeaten, finishing the season in a respectable 15th place. The next year, they improved that to 10th, impressing in the League Cup, where they reached the semi despite limited funds in the transfer market and having to sell star forward Santa Cruz to Man City. Allardyce's success saw him offered a lucrative job in Dubai, but the club blocked his exit, as they were in the middle of a takeover by the Venkies. Allardyce knuckled down to the task of keeping Blackburn up again, but just 4 months later, he was sacked with the team in 13th, so the new owners could bring in Steve Kean, who subsequently embarked on one of the worst managerial runs of the modern era, dropping 2 places by the end of the year before getting the club relegated the following campaign for the first time in over a decade. And they haven't been back since. 6. Victor Manuel Vucetich. By far the most obscure name on our list for European football fans, Victor Manuel Vucetich is a Mexican coach who currently manages Liga MX outfit Querétaro. A 5-time domestic champion with 4 different sides, Vucetich has been in management for over 30 years, and his finest period came between 2009 and 2013, when he was in charge of Monterrey. When they hired Vucetich, Monterrey hadn't won the league in 6 years, and had only 2 domestic titles in their history, a tally which he doubled in the space of 2 seasons. National success gave the club entry into the CONCACAF Champions League, and they were unbeaten in the competition, winning their first continental trophy, before repeating that feat again the next year, and again the season after that. In the course of those 3 campaigns, they scored 70 and conceded 22 in 34 matches, as well as putting in a good showing at the 2012 Club World Cup, losing to UCL winners Chelsea in the semi and finishing 3rd. But despite his extraordinary record, Vucetich found himself in trouble early in his 5th season, with multiple sales and retirements depleting his established first 11. After winning 1 and losing 3 of the opening 7 fixtures, Vucetich was fired, going on to coach the Mexican national side, where he somehow lasted just 2 games, despite 1 loss and 1 win. It would take Monterrey another 6 years and 5 coaches to return to the top, winning a league and Champions League double in 2019. 5. Pablo Machín. After a 2-month spell at Espanyol resulted in 5 points and another sacking, there will be plenty at Sevilla convinced they made the right decision in binning Pablo Machín. But the Spaniard's work in his 10 months in Andalusia was outstanding, putting together an exciting side which at the time of his departure ranked 2nd in the league by expected points, with the 2nd best attack to Barcelona. Unfortunately, Sevilla suffered from terrible luck under Machín, earning 7 points fewer than XG predicted, as well as ending up with a +10 goal difference compared to XG's suggestion of +18. Meanwhile, teams like Alaves and Getafe overperformed, leaving Sevilla 6th when Machín was finally canned, despite a 5-2 victory over Real Sociedad in his final game. Sevilla got a quick bounce, going from taking 1.5 shots a game to 1.7, but their metrics steadily got worse under interim boss Joaquin Caparrós, leading them to appoint Julian Lopetegui in the summer of 2019. Lopetegui looks to have righted the ship, but after 2/3 of a season under the former Madrid coach, Sevilla are earning exactly as many expected points per game as they were under Pablo Machín, with a better defence but a much more boring attack. Spending a lot of money to stand still, hardly the way to break into the Champions League. 4. Andre Villas-Boas. Andre Villas-Boas has an unfortunate history of leaving just before success. At Chelsea, his sacking led to the club's Cinderella run to the Champions League title, while at Spurs, his departure paved the way for the appointment of Mauricio Pochettino, who achieved what AVB had been hired to do: make Tottenham one of the best sides in Europe. As a result, Villas-Boas is often criticised, but his work had laid foundations for success in both North and West London. At Chelsea, his team took around 6 shots more than they conceded per game, and what ultimately led to the Portuguese's sacking was his attempt to move the squad on from the veterans who had led it under Mourinho half a decade earlier, rather than a lack of coaching skill. That blue side ranks 12th for the most shots by a Premier League side since 2009, and his Tottenham team were 2 places higher the following campaign, with a bigger gap between their chances created and conceded than the current Liverpool team. Unfortunately, AVB's system required intense pressing and a high defensive line, meaning that when the opposition broke through, they could run riot, with a 6-0 loss to City and a 5-0 loss to Liverpool, ultimately getting the manager fired at White Hart Lane. That was despite a then Premier League points haul of 72 for the Lily Whites. And AVB's signings, including Dembele, Lloris, Vertonghen and Eriksen, would go on to star under Pochettino, while the man himself went on to Russia, China and rally driving, before returning to management with Marseille. 3. Jupp Heynckes. At number 3, we knew we were picking a Real Madrid coach, and while we could have gone for Manuel Pellegrini, who earned 96 points in his one season as Los Blancos coach, or Carlo Ancelotti, who won the Champions League, we've chosen Jupp Heynckes, who was appointed at the Bernabeu in 1997. The German had already managed Bayern to 2 titles, and arrived in Madrid following a 2-year spell with Tenerife, who he took to the semis of the UEFA Cup. After bringing in Christian Carambeu from Sampdoria and nabbing Fernando Morientes on a free, Heynckes got off to a strong start in his first 2 games, defeating Barcelona to win the Spanish Super Cup, but it was in the European competition where he would excel. Real finished top of their Champions League group before knocking out Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Dortmund and Juventus on their way to their first continental crown since 1966, scoring 22 and conceding just 5 in 11 games. But that success required trade-offs, and Real were knocked out of the Copa del Rey at the round of 16, as well as ending up 4th in La Liga. Heynckes was sacked and Jose Antonio Camacho took over, only to be sacked after 22 days following a bust-up with the board. 2 more coaches would be hired and fired over the next 16 months before Real Madrid finally got lucky with Vicente del Bosque, while Heynckes would go on to success with Schalke before a historic treble with Bayern Munich. 2. Rafa Benitez. Rafa Benitez arrived in Liverpool in 2004 with the unenviable task of ending a 24-year title drought, but he had previous. The Spaniard was fresh from a pair of domestic triumphs with Valencia, ending Los Che's 31-year wait for the championship, and he went one better in his first season at Anfield, bringing the Champions League trophy to Merseyside for the first time in 21 years. However, his tenure coincided with the best Arsenal team ever and Jose Mourinho's arrival at Chelsea, and by the time those teams faded, Manchester United had executed a successful rebuild after a cycle away from the top. That meant that Benitez's best ever league performance was second place in 2008-09, despite a second UCL final in 2007 and a 55% win rate, actually 3% higher than the Reds' icon Bill Shankly. Unfortunately, his team were also known for their defensive brilliance rather than attacking verve, and as injuries crippled star striker Fernando Torres, the fun disappeared. In the 2009-10 campaign, the club were eliminated in the UCL group stage, racking up 4 successive losses for the first time since 1987, and they limped into 7th at the end of the year, seeing their last chance at a trophy evaporate with a semi-final loss to Atletico Madrid in the Europa League. Benitez technically departed by mutual consent, with a £6 million payoff, almost £100,000 of which he donated to the Hillsborough family support group. It would take 5 years for the team to find another coach who got the club in quite the same way, and Rafa would never hit the same heights again. 1. Vicente del Bosque. As you may have guessed, it's back to Madrid for number 1, and it's the sad walrus himself, Vicente del Bosque. Now best known as the architect of Spain's World Cup triumph in 2010 and victory at Euro 2012, the former Madrid midfielder coached Los Blancos on 3 occasions, the last time for nearly 4 years between 1999 and 2003, making him the longest serving manager Real have had since Miguel Munoz left in 1974. Hired after John Toshank and Gus Hiddink had failed to build on Jupp Heynckes' success, Del Bosque emulated the German in winning the Champions League in his first season, and they would make the semis in all 4 of his campaigns with the side, lifting the trophy again in 2002. They added 2 titles and another 4 trophies in his tenure, and while it's easy to attribute that to the stars the club brought in, Zidane, Ronaldo, Makelele and Figo among others, it was Del Bosque who kept them happy, despite having little say in transfer policy. Remarkably, he was told his time was up the day after winning Real's 29th domestic title in 2003, putting them 13 ahead of Barca. They would go through 9 managers in the next 7 years, going out of the UCL at the round of 16 6 seasons running. The next coach to see out 18 months at the side, Jose Mourinho, nearly a decade later. So those were our 10 managers we thought were sacked too soon, but have we missed out anyone else? Please let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please click on screen right now for another FD Classic, and as always guys, don't forget to like and subscribe.